you all for putting up with listening to my story. I call it Physics, Rocket Science, and Hidden Figures, or how I landed in the LMC. This is Dr. Daniel Q. Posen. Has anyone ever heard of him? He was, in the early 60s, a well-known astronomer, physicist, and local TV personality. Now, I didn't know all those things about him until I started looking this up, but I knew that my dad took me to see Dr. Posen when I was 5 years old. Now, what kind of a person takes a 5-year-old to see a lecture by a physicist?
A smart one.
I don't know, a smart one, that's right. My dad, who was a blue-collar worker, son of immigrants, seems to be the last person who would do that, but he saw something in me that needed nurturing, and after I went to see Dr. Posen, I found out that I love science, and I wanted to find out everything about the world. So my dad is one of my hidden figures. So these are what I'm going to talk about. Did you ever see these greeting cards in the store and you wonder if these are real people? Yeah. Well, that's my mom and dad. We discovered them at a gift shop one day and had no idea that they were on a greeting card. That's Bob and Helen Seifert.
No way.
Yes. And
I love that.
I look kind of like my mom. My daughter Bonnie looks like my dad.
They get royalties?
Yeah, you would think. So they grew up during the Depression, so they had the work ethic of the Great Generation. My mom quit school at 16, which she was always a little embarrassed about, but she needed to do that to help support her family. My dad joined the Marines straight out of high school and got in on the last couple of years of World War II. He was always proud of saying he was one of the first people to stand at Ground Zero at Nagasaki. I don't know if that was a smart thing to do, but he did it. And so they got married in their early 20s and had 3 children. I'm the one in the middle. Now, I always felt a little different from my sisters. They had curly hair and I had straight hair. That was benefit of a Tonette home perm, which my mom gave me many of to try to get my straight hair curly. And I always had my nose in a book. So, I felt a little bit different than they were. Now, this is another one of my hidden figures. I like this picture. She looks like Agatha Christie or something, but that's my grandmother. Now, my grandmother lived 2 doors down from me in Brookfield when we were growing up, and I was not close to her at all. My memories of her are of her sitting in her easy chair with a book and a dog on her lap. I don't ever remember a single conversation that I had with my grandmother. But my grandmother gave me something that I am eternally grateful for, and that is subscriptions to the Doubleday Book Club and the Nancy Drew Book Club. So every month of my early childhood, I got these little brown paper packages in the mail, and I read them like crazy. I was a voracious reader. Now, I wondered at the time, why did my grandmother give me this gift when my sisters just got the quarters that came around whenever we would visit? But apparently, she was a reader, and she saw that I was a reader too, and she wanted to take care of that. I think every librarian has a library in their past, right? Well, this is mine. This is the Helen Plum Memorial Library in Lombard, and we moved to Lombard when I was 5 years old. Now, my parents didn't have a lot of money, so we did not do any fancy vacations, maybe Wisconsin Dells every now and then. I could not have the lessons I wanted to have because I wanted to take ballet. I wanted piano lessons. I wanted art lessons because the world was my oyster. I wanted to do all these things, but there wasn't money to do it. But I had a library card, so I could experience all of those things. I still remember the aisle I stood in when I discovered historical fiction. There are books that are like a time machine that take you to another place. I was so excited. I thought they invented that just for me, but actually it's been around for a while. Now, this is my grade school, Sacred Heart School in Lombard, and there was a very secret meeting that my parents went to when I was in 1st grade. It was at night, and I remember my sisters and I were all sitting around. What did Lori do? Because our parents had been called in to see the principal. Well, it turned out I was one of a small group of students that had been identified as gifted, and in a very progressive move for the early 60s, they were going to accelerate us. So we were going to cover 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grade in 2 years. So even though my parents over and over said, You did not skip a grade, you were accelerated. I always felt like fourth grade must not be very important because I didn't go there, which is ironic when you think that I taught fourth grade for 8 years. I never shared this information with my students, however, because we know that fourth grade is very important. This is my cousin Margie. She was my godmother, so she was quite a bit older than me. And she was the first one in our family to go to college. So again, she saw something in me that needed nurturing, so she was my propulsion in my rocket science. She took me to all kinds of things and all kinds of places, and I totally blame her for my eclectic tastes in music and art and everything else. We went to the Grand Kabuki Theater. I saw Pete Seeger, Arlo Guthrie, Judy Collins, Creedence Clearwater Revival when I was like this big. And again, she chose me to do that. And in a very future librarian move, I remember one time we were going to see an exhibit at the Art Institute on Pablo Picasso. So I spent the week before on my living room floor with my favorite book, or set of books, the encyclopedia, and I wrote a report about Pablo Picasso, which I delivered to my cousin all the way to Chicago. My cousin and my aunt and uncle also took me on vacation with them. So before that, I had only gone to Wisconsin, Michigan once or twice, but they took me really all over the United States, and I learned about history and culture and science. I saw the Apollo 8 moon rocket on the launch pad in Florida in 1968 before it went up. This is my high school, Glenbard East, and that's me. I was pretty young, as you can imagine, because I skipped that grade and I had a late birthday. Another one of my important people was Mrs. Caldwell. She was my AP geometry teacher my freshman year of high school. Now, we all had to do a project on some mathematical concept or idea and do an oral report on it. Well, I absolutely hated oral reports, but I did mine on the abacus. And I taught my class how to use an abacus. Don't ask me to do it now, but I could then. So after class, Mrs. Caldwell called me up. She said, "Lauren, what do you plan on doing when you get out of school?" And I said, "Well, I want to read some books, and maybe I'll go on vacation." And she said, No. I mean, when you graduate, what do you want to do?" She said, "Have you ever considered teaching?" And my mouth just dropped open because I had considered doing everything else except teaching. So I politely listened and walked out of the room, and I thought, she's crazy. There's no way I want to be a teacher. I'm not one of you people who was playing school when you were little. I love school, don't get me wrong, but I thought those teachers were saints. Because one, I didn't really like little kids very much. That's a horrible thing for a teacher to say, right? They were annoying. I babysat, but only enough money to go to Cubs games. That was it. The second thing was I hated public speaking. Totally hated it. They didn't make us do it when we were little kids, and so it terrified me. And third, I had so many interests that I had determined I needed a 9-to-5 job where I had my evenings and weekends free so that I could do all the things I was interested in. And I didn't want to be a teacher and take home papers to grade and all that kind of stuff. So I went on to college at the tender age of 16, went to Augustana. I was not an education major. I started out as a history major, loved Augustana. My dad worked for the government making torpedoes, and when the Vietnam War came to a close, there was not much use for armaments anymore, so he got laid off. So my parents came to visit me at school unexpectedly and told me they could no longer help me with my college education. So, that's okay. I went to Rosary College in River Forest. I became a commuter. I continued to work. I had been working since I was 14 years old, so jobs were not foreign to me. And there I decided to be a chemistry biology major. Close, right? History, chemistry, biology. But fortunately, since Rosary is a liberal arts college, I was able to take English literature and art history and music theory, a little bit of that, and philosophy and psychology. One time I had a run-in with an English professor. First day of class, called me up and said, "I don't think you belong here." And I said, why not? I signed up for it. It's all okay. He said, well, you're a science major. This is a 400 level class in Chaucer. I don't think you can make it. Well, like Al said earlier, don't tell me I can't do anything. My husband, who I inherited the name May from him, his family has a motto, where there's a will, there's a way, and where there's a way, there's a May. And I still have the annotated Canterbury Tales, which I annotated, at my house to prove that I could take a 400 level English class even if I was a chemistry major. Now, I had a little change in correction here. Sister Mary Woods was one of my chemistry professors at Rosary, and one day after school, or after class, she called me over and said, Lauren, what do you plan on doing when you graduate? You know, I thought I'd heard this before. She better not tell me to be a teacher, because I don't want to be a teacher. And she said, have you ever thought of going into library science? I said, no. And she said, well, I noticed you have a lot of diverse interests. You're pretty literate, and there is a need for people who are literate but and can write, but have a knowledge of scientific vocabulary and concepts. So I thought about that, and then my senior year, I saved up enough money to go back to Augustana to graduate with a degree in biology, and then turned around and went back to Rosary for my master's in library science. Now, my specialty, I'm not sure how they do it now, but was in special libraries. So I was not a school librarian, I was not a public librarian, but I was a special librarian. So I was trained to do research for other people. So my courses were in indexing and abstracting, searching, very primitive searching, computer searching, but in schools we teach kids how to do research. But my job was to work for chemists, researchers, and do the research for them. So my job that I got hired for right out of school in 1977 was, I gotta think back, that seems so long ago, it can't be right, was at Armac Chemical Company in McCook, Illinois. I was one of 3 professional librarians in a room about this size. That was pretty awesome when people were trying to scrounge for librarians at public and school libraries. So there were 3 of us. My main job was to do cataloging. It was all original cataloging of scientific materials because that just wasn't standardized yet. And this was my baby. This is an IBM Selectric Composer typewriter. Now, remember we had catalog cards in a big card catalog, so you had to make multiple cards for every title that you had. With this one, I could make 1 MasterCard, and then it would just churn out another 5 or however many I needed for my subject headings and series and all that kind of stuff. So it was pretty darn amazing. Now, this was even more impressive. This is our search computer. Do you notice anything that's missing? What's missing?
Screen.
A screen. Yeah, there was no screen. There was no monitor. There were 2 this is before internet, guys. Okay, there were 2 databases we used, which are kind of, if you look up the history of the internet, this was early internet. It was Lockheed Dialog and SDC Orbit. And the training for those 2 was about a week long for each one because you had to learn a controlled vocabulary, search, Boolean logic, how to construct a very concise search query to get exactly what you wanted to. And then, so because it costs a lot of money for the connection, this little thing here where you plug in the phone in the modem, we would get it all set up, and then you'd sit down and type it, plug in your phone, and it would go beep, 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 and then go through, and then you would wait for it to go through the database, and then the computer would type back to you whatever the answer was. So it would give you citations for articles that answered your question. And then I would have, since I took care of interlibrary loans a lot, I would have to find those journals and get copies, photocopies of the journals to get to our scientists. So it was pretty impressive. I didn't know at the time, but we were really on the cutting edge of things. Now, not only did I find cool technology at my job, I also found my husband there. Les was a PhD organic research chemist at Armac. Now, when he moved to Nalco, that's what brought us to Naperville. Soon after, we started reproducing, and we had 4 children. Now, as much as I love my job, I did need to spend time at home with my kids. So I started doing things like, well, the first one was, I signed up at PACES. It was a Parent and Childhood Education Society. And I signed up to be in their speakers bureau, which I went home and told my husband this. He said, "You're crazy, you hate public speaking." But I signed up to go to local high schools and give lectures on pregnancy, childbirth, child development, and child care. So if you can go into a high school class at 8 months pregnant and talk about childbirth, you can do pretty much anything. So that got me over my public speaking problem. I was a Girl Scout leader. I taught Sunday school. I was the head of art awareness at Clow. And I was an LMC assistant, wasn't I, Beth?
Yes, you were.
One day I was in the car with my kids during a driving rainstorm explaining the water cycle when suddenly lightning flashed and it occurred to me, wait, you're a teacher. And Mrs. Caldwell, from back all those years ago, words came back to me, and I thought, I really am a teacher, so I need to go teach. My kids are starting to get a little bit older, and I thought, no problem, I could be a teacher and I could be a librarian. 1 or 2 classes and I should be in good shape, right? No. I called Rosary and said, I have a master's in library science, and I want to be a school librarian. They said, okay, do you have a teaching certificate? I said, no. They said, well, you got to get that first. And I thought, okay, well, the good people at North Central College evaluated all of my classes, and they said it would only take 2.5 years for me to get the courses that I need to be certified as a teacher. I didn't want another master's degree. I was already too expensive. So I went back, and I felt like I would get a better education in education if I would go through the undergraduate program, which I did. I got a long-term sub job at May Watts in 4th grade, and then the following year, even though I was very expensive, Fred Lasher hired me to teach 3rd grade, which I did, taught 3rd grade for 2 years, looped with my class to 4th grade, and then did that for 8 years, until I had a little course correction here. Mike Grazak was our principal at the time, and during the summer of 2007, I believe it was, he called me in and said, Lori, would you come in and sit in on the interviews for our LMC, our new LMC director? I didn't even know our old LMC director had left.
Which was me, that was me.
No, it was Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Chris was there for a year,
Yes,
and then it was you.
That's
And I said, sure, I'll do that. Well, I walk in and he goes, Lori, why aren't you taking this position? Just like that. And I said, I don't know. I'm a teacher. And the thing that I kind of skipped is all that process of going through the teaching at North Central. I loved the classroom. I mean, I wanted my own class. I didn't want to do any of those administrative things that came with being a librarian. So that's why I ended up in the classroom. So I really hadn't thought about being a librarian after that. But I had one of the best classroom libraries in the school. When it came to Rebecca Caudle time, the table was full of my kids because we always read all of them. So I still loved books. And so then Mike said, well, I'll tell you what, why don't you sit in on the interviews? There were 2 candidates left. He said, and if at the end of that you think you can do a better job than they can, you let me know. So we were sitting around it. I remember very clearly Linda DeNiccolo, if you know her, our reading specialist, was in on these interviews, and nobody else knew that Mike and I had this conversation. So we're done, and Linda says, well, they both have good qualities. What do you think, Lori? Who's better? And I said, well, I think I'm better than both of them. So and she kind of looks at me like, what? And that's how it turned out. So the rest is now, I learned a few things along the way. First of all, I happen to like children. I didn't know that, or I didn't like them when I was 12, but I like them a lot now. I act like a kid a lot. That is me. In George, what's his name, costume over there. And I can't think of a better job. And besides that, I got over the public speaking thing. I found out if you can laugh at yourself, not take yourself too seriously, public speaking isn't that bad. And the third thing was with the job that doesn't come home with you. If you do a job that you love, it is going to come home with you because it's part of your life. You can't really separate yourself from that. And look, I got to investigate all of the topics that I love so much with all of my kids and read about that. Well, as you know, or you're going to find out in a minute if you didn't know, I'm going to be retiring soon. I actually go from here straight over to Maywatts to my retirement reception.
Oh.
So it's a big day. But don't worry about me, because I still have lots of interests. I have plants in my garage right now waiting to go into the ground. I have a stack of books, and that is my actual stack of books that I have waiting for me. I love volcanoes, and I've seen quite a few, but I have more volcanoes to see, and some continents I haven't been to yet. The other thing is I have an ever-growing group of grandchildren who are waiting for me to spend some more time with them, so it should be lots of fun. Now, forgive me if I leave you with just a couple of words of wisdom, if I can get through this. You all have the potential, if you haven't already been, hidden figures in somebody's life. When my husband and I were at Noodles one day, and this young lady comes up to me and she says, "Mrs. May?" And I said, "Yeah." And she told me her name, and I remembered her from one of my first years of teaching. She was a pretty average student. Nice kid. I don't remember having any earth-shattering talks with her or anything like that. And she said, "I just want to tell you I'm in my second year of teaching, and I became a teacher because of you." And I was blown away. So I was one of her hidden figures. And you are in the same position. As working with kids, you have no idea what impact you make. So keep in mind, be positive. Keep a smile on your face. When you're out there, just embrace the children. If they bring up a topic, get them going on it, because you may see something in them that they don't see in themselves. So shine a light on it, because they may not even know it's there. Okay? Thank you.